What's up nerds, Zach the Goblin here. In Warhammer 40k, the Primarchs were supposed to be the pinnacle of the Emperor's vision, his perfect generals to enact humanity's rule across the stars. But not all of them were the bastions of virtue that they may have appeared to be on the surface. The Traitor Primarchs betrayed the Imperium for various reasons, some good and some, well, pretty dumb. So today I'm going to be talking about how each of the Traitor Primarchs fell, and since most of them didn't fall in a single instant, what led up to it, and finally, if I think they were justified in their actions given their specific situations. But first, if you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to like and subscribe, as it really does help out the channel growth a lot. And since whether I find each Primarch's fall justified or not is completely subjective, let me know what you think in the comments below. Also, shout out to this commenter for the video idea. I'm unsure how to pronounce the name, so instead of butchering it, I'm just showing it on screen right now. Okay, so with all that out of the way, it's Goblin time. Okay, so we're gonna go in Legion order here and start with Snake Daddy himself, Fulgrim. At first glance, it would seem like Fulgrim would never have betrayed the Emperor. I mean, he was like obsessed with him. His whole thing was seeking perfection, and his goalpost for that was the Emperor himself. His Legion is the Emperor's children, for crying out loud. But that all changed when he found the Snake Orgy sword. As shown in the book Fulgrim, the sword started manipulating him, slowly at first, but then ramping up in intensity. The whole time, Fulgrim was thinking that the voice was his own conscience, so he didn't even realize he was being manipulated. So as time went on, it kind of guided his actions more and more, slowly corrupting him. He would fully snap when he killed his brother Ferrus Manus, which completely broke him, allowing the demon to fully take control of his body. So on one hand, it seems like it wasn't really even his fault, because he was just mind controlled, right? And he didn't know anything about the warp or demons, so how could he have known that it was a bad idea to pick up the sword? I mean, to counterpoint, I would say that, hey, maybe if there's this weird ritualistic snake orgy going on around a sword, maybe don't pick it up. So because of all of that, I kind of want to say that he's justified just because, I mean, for lack of a better term, he was kind of mind controlled. He's a victim, right? Because without that demon sword, Fulgrim would have never considered going traitor. But then I started thinking about it a little bit more. It could be said that Fulgrim's personality flaws, his obsession with perfection, made him a perfect mark for Slaanesh. And even when he was being influenced by the sword, the small part of his consciousness that realized that something was up fought back on a couple of occasions. At one point, he almost orders his fleet to blow up Horus. And that same part of him is what stops him from killing Ferrus Manus the first time that they fought. I mean, even when he did eventually kill Ferrus Manus, he tried to pull the blow at the last second, but his muscles were no longer his own to control. So the tricky thing now is that we see that Fulgrim is capable of resisting the demon sword. So since it's not impossible, some of the blame does fall on his shoulders, right? But then again, he didn't really know what he was fighting against until it was too late. So I want to say that maybe justified isn't the right word, but it wasn't entirely his own fault that he became a traitor. But then I also remember that when he did eventually regain control of his body, he was like, nah, I don't regret anything that I did. It's actually really cool that I'm a traitor. So, you know, this is kind of hard to tell because maybe at that point he was just in too deep, right? It's too late. So this one for me is kind of a toss-up. I'm gonna say though that just because his own personality flaws led him to being more easily corrupted, and he just kind of ignored the signs along the way. So I'm gonna give it a final verdict of not justified. But again, this one could have went either way, honestly. Okay, next up we have Perturabo. So for Perturabo, the resentment slowly built up over time. He was mistreated, and his legion was sent to the most vicious war zones, always laying sieges, sent to battlefields where there was really no honor or glory to be had. He was always sent to destroy something. But the thing about Perturabo was he wanted to create things, not destroy them. And he was always jealous of Rogel Dorn, with the Emperor obviously favoring Dorn over him. And then pair that with the fact that he could always see the Eye of Terror, no matter where he was in the galaxy. Quick side tangent, you know how each Primarch has their own special sauce, right? Sanguinius has foresight and Horus has extra charisma. Well, Perturabo's is the ability to see flaws in anything that he looks at, which is why he was so good at siegecraft, right? He could look at defenses and just intrinsically see what the weakest point was. And this is also why he could always see the Eye of Terror, because it's the largest flaw in the physical galaxy. And you know, always seeing the flaw flaws and everything, could be another reason why he's so pessimistic all the time, right? But I digress. The moment of no return for him was when his own homeworld, Olympia, rebelled against the Empire. He went there and was like, hey guys, you better kill 1 in 10 of yourselves for retribution, or I'm just gonna kill all of you. And many of them refused, so Perturabo had, let's just say, a monumental crash out. He purged Olympia city by city, sparing no one, and any Iron Warriors that refused to take part in the genocide suffered the same fate. He even strangled his own foster sister to death. When the massacre was over, 5 million Olympians had been killed and the rest put into slavery. So after all that's done, he kind of realizes, oh no, the Emperor is never gonna forgive me for this. I'm screwed. But then, when all seemed lost to Perturabo, Horus came in with words that he had never heard before. Good job. And that's all it took. Horus commended Perturabo for his decisive action, and he swore an oath of loyalty to the War Master almost immediately. So if there's one lesson we could learn here, it's be nice to your kids. This one's another close one for me because, on one hand, yeah, the Emperor was a bad dad, like he was to most of the Traitor Primarchs. But I don't think not being told good job enough justifies him turning traitor. And I know he felt like he had no other choice after he killed everyone on his own homeworld, but his own anger problems don't become a justification. But I would say this is still pretty close because, you know, bad dad. But I think I'm gonna go with not justified, with one caveat. I am unaware of this ever happening, but if Perturabo ever expressed to the Emperor that he was unhappy with all this destruction and he wanted to create things, or if he ever expressed his displeasure at what he was doing at all, then I think I would change this to justified. Okay, so now we have Konrad Curze. So Konrad Curze was super insane from the get-go, and he's one of the Primarchs where you look at him and you're like, yeah, it makes sense that he would join Horus, but it definitely goes deeper than that. So Konrad Curze has psychic foresight, but his curse is that he would see the worst of all possible futures. When the Emperor arrived on Nostromo, Curze succumbed to a vision so potent and horrifying that he tried to claw out his own eyes. When the Emperor stopped him, Curze looked at him and his brothers, and it is said that he foresaw the fates of all of them, as well as his own death. So, you know, pretty heavy. So during the Great Crusade, Curze had visions of the civil war that was, as we know, eventually going to take place, and confided in his brother Fulgrim. And Fulgrim then went and ratted him out to Rogel Dorn, who confronted Curze. This betrayal of trust finally causing Curze to snap, and he attacked and wounded Dorn, as well as massacring several Imperial fists. So he gets out of there. And that, along with all of the Night Lord's terror campaigns, leaving a trail of devastated worlds across the galaxy, forced the Emperor to recall Curze to answer for charges laid against him and his men. But around this time, the Horus Heresy breaks out, and Konrad Curze doesn't even hesitate. He is very quick to swear his legion to the forces of the War Master. So at first glance, it just seems like insanity was what caused him to become a traitor. But there's more to discuss here. You see, Konrad Curze believes in destiny above all things. He believes that he doesn't really have a choice in anything he does, because everything's predetermined. He foresaw his own death at the hands of an Imperial assassin, and he's like, well, obviously I can't be on the Imperium side or else they wouldn't be trying to kill me, so obviously I have to join the traitors. And I know that eventually Sanguinius does prove to him that the future can be changed, but by that point, Curze had committed way too many atrocities based on the visions that he saw, so he just couldn't accept that. It's like a sunk cost fallacy. He's in too deep. Same reason why he allowed himself to be assassinated, because if he stopped it, he would prove that his visions could be changed, and it would prove that he had a choice, so he would have to face all the bad things that he did, which he just mentally couldn't do. So ultimately, based on Konrad Curze's own view of the universe and all the knowledge he had at the point that he turned traitor, I would say that he was justified. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the big angry boy himself, Angron. For Angron, I think that you have to start a little earlier in his life than the others. During the scattering of the Primarchs, Angron ended up on the planet Nuceria. On this planet, he was enslaved by the High Riders and forced into gladiatorial fights, and he was quite good at this. Eventually, his masters ordered him to fight his surrogate father to the death. Angron refused, so the High Riders implanted the butcher's nails through his skull and into his brain, effectively lobotomized. The nails amplified Angron's anger and rage, removing removing the ability to enjoy any other feelings or emotions. After the surgery, he ended up killing his father in a blind frenzy. After he came to his senses, he was filled with immense despair, and this kind of acted as a catalyst, with Angron leading a slave revolt among his fellow gladiators. With his great army of slaves, he fled into the mountains, where he lived for several years. They would defeat the armies of the slave masters again and again. The issue was, though, that they had little to eat in the barren mountains, and were exhausted from the constant battling. Eventually, 7 well-equipped armies surrounded Angron and his starving forces. Angron then fed his own blood to his comrades to keep them alive, knowing that their inevitable death was upon them, but it was better to go out fighting. But just before the battle started, the Emperor of Mankind arrives. The Emperor teleports down to Angron and is like, hey, let's get out of here. I got a whole ass legion for you. But Angron ultimately refuses because he wants to die amongst his comrades while fighting against his oppressors. So the Emperor returns to his flagship, but then is like, psych, and teleports Angron up to the ship against his will. And there he's forced to watch as his comrades are quickly massacred. Angron angrily asking why the Emperor didn't intervene to save his comrades, with the Emperor just being like, yo, why the hell would I do that? It's not like any of them are young enough to become Astartes, so I have no use for them. And it was really at that moment where Angron's like, never again. He hated the Emperor from that day onward. And it didn't help that the Imperium could be a little tyrannical, and it reminded Angron of the slave masters from Nuceria. So when Horus started the rebellion, there was no question really. Angron was obviously going to join the cause. And honestly, the Emperor did him pretty dirty. So I understand it. I say he's justified, especially because all the Emperor would have had to do was save Angron's comrades. I have no doubt that Angron would have been loyal. The Emperor would have been viewed as a savior to Angron instead of just another tyrannical leader. Okay, so now we're going to talk about Mortarion. So Mortarion has a somewhat similar backstory to Angron, so I won't repeat myself too much. He crash landed on the planet Barbarous and was taken in by one of the overlords, who were a cruel xeno species who enslaved the humans that lived there. Also, they were psychers. Okay, so Morty's overlord stepdaddy is kind of a dick, right? So he runs away and joins with the humans, vowing to get revenge on the oppressors. Before he was going to finally fight his father and complete his revenge, a mysterious figure arrived on the planet. Obviously, the Emperor. Morty's kind of mad because he's like, hey, I deserve all the glory. I don't want to share with this new person. But then the Emperor's like, hey, I bet you can't capture that last mansion alone. With Morty trying because he's like, oh, what? Am I going to back down from a challenge? He fails, and he's about to be killed by the Overlord. And then the Emperor just steps in between him and kills him with one sweep of his sword. And then the Emperor tells Morty, hey, I'm your daddy. We got some great crusading to do. Let's get going. And apparently Mortarion just never really forgave the Emperor for this. Man, I hate my kill-stealing father. Like, this isn't even as bad as what happened to Angron. The Emperor killed the oppressor. He got revenge. Like, he helped. I mean, did he help in kind of an dickish way? Yeah, of course, that's what the Emperor does. But like, I think Mortarion's just kind of being a big baby about this. And there's a little more to it than that. Mortarion has a strong distrust of witches and psychers. And you know, the Emperor is like the biggest psyker of them all. But the thing about that is, Mortarion would frequently get what he wanted. He hated psychers, and the Imperium effectively banned them at the Council of Nicaea. But he's just like, no, I don't want solutions. I just want to be mad. And instead, he sided with the faction that was gallivanting with warp demons. Now, I know that Horus has like an ungodly amount of charisma, but I don't think that's enough to save him. So I rule that Mortarion is not justified. Okay, so now we have Magnus the Red. So honestly, the section on Magnus could be really big because it's a lot of things that just build on top of each other. But to keep it concise, I'm going to try to summarize this as best I can. Ultimately though, Magnus's story is one of hubris guiding his actions again and again. Okay, so when he first met his legion, they were being afflicted by the flesh change, which was a genetic defect, allowing them to be mutated by warp energies. Magnus unknowingly makes a deal with Tzeentch to stop this, which was, you know, his first mistake. He would then delve into warp sorceries a little too much, drawing the ire of his brothers, mainly Mortarion and Leman Russ. So eventually that led to the Council of Nicaea, the Emperor being like, hey, the warp's really dangerous. Nobody's above its corruption. We need to stop that shit. No more psychers. And yes, that means you too, Magnus. especially you, Magnus. But then Magnus is like, yeah, no, obviously that doesn't apply to me, even though Magnus was literally the one on trial. So then he continues on with his bullshit, eventually seeing Horus turning to chaos through the warp, and tries to stop him but is unsuccessful. He then astral projects to warn the Emperor back on Terra and busts through the webway. The breach he made, allowing demons to invade the webway and ruining the Emperor's webway project. That was too many webways in quick succession. So the Emperor is pissed, and Magnus forgets to give him the warning of Horus's betrayal. Leman Russ then gets dispatched to bring Magnus back to Terra, and Horus convinces him to execute Magnus instead. So Magnus gets baned and shattered into shards, which ultimately then forces him to side with Horus because it was his only chance to become whole again. So yeah, while at the time he turned traitor, he didn't really have another choice. It was still his fault that he was in that situation to begin with. Now, could the Emperor have communicated with Magnus, told him about the Webway project? Yes, of course. But also, Magnus could just listen to somebody for once. But throughout all of this, Magnus just assumes he knows better than everybody else, which ultimately caused his downfall. So ultimately, I'm gonna say he was not justified. For a little bonus Magnus discussion, the Emperor even gave him a chance to return to the Imperium, offering him a new legion. The only condition was that he would give up the Thousand Sons, which at first glance, Magnus understandably refuses. But then I remembered that he was willing to let the Space Wolves kill them all. He would have given up the lives of all of his sons for his own mistakes anyways. He ended up changing his mind, but still. So it makes his refusal seem a little less altruistic. That doesn't really factor into whether or not I think he was justified. It's just a little interesting tidbit for you. Okay, so now we have the leader of the traitors himself, Horus. This one is actually going to be relatively quick. So Horus's resentment was building for quite a while. Ever since he was given the title of War Master, he felt kind of abandoned by the Emperor. And then you pair this with the general sense of unease he felt due to the High Lords of Terra. He felt like he was going to be replaced. So he was, for lack of a better term, just feeling insecure. So this allowed Erebus, who we all hate, to come in and subtly manipulate events, which led Horus to being stabbed by the Anathame, which was a sword empowered by the Chaos God Nurgle. The corrupting powers are slowly killing him. So on the verge of death, he was shown visions of a future where he and some of the other Primarchs were forgotten, while others were venerated, and the Emperor himself was worshipped as a god. So he chooses to rebel against the Emperor. The Chaos Gods save his life, which kicks off the whole Horus heresy. So his choice was ultimately join Chaos or die, which might be enough to say that he was justified, other than the fact that it never seems that he actually cares if he's gonna live or die. That never seems to factor into his actual choice. And to me, it seems like Horus can tell that Erebus and the Chaos Gods aren't exactly being truthful to him. I mean, it's pretty obvious that they're trying to manipulate him. Erebus initially shows himself in the guise of Hastur Serjanus, which Horus sees right through, showing how untrustworthy Erebus is. And Magnus himself even shows himself to Horus, telling him, no, yeah, all of this is baloney. All of this is bullshit. And Horus knows that it's his brother Magnus. And he knows that Magnus has no reason to lie to him at this point. Well, he does say something along the lines of, well, you're obviously doing magic right now, and that's against the verdict of the Council of Nicaea, so why would I trust you? Come on. The other side is obviously manipulating you, Horus. Who cares if your brother's doing a little magic? It really just seems like it's less that Horus was corrupted and lied to by the Chaos Gods, and more that he let himself be swayed, if that makes sense. It's almost like he already had all these insecurities and resentment towards the Emperor and the Lords of Terra that he just, this is like, oh, this is my reason to rebel, almost. And I know it's not like quite that, but I think that Horus was too smart to just be completely fooled by Erebus and the Chaos Gods. And when I read False Gods, to me it seemed like he, at least a good portion of him, realized that the Chaos Gods were being a little manipulative and they weren't telling the whole truth. So ultimately, because of all of that, I'm going to say that he was not justified. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the first heretic himself, Lorgar. So Lorgar is another case where I think his upbringing factors into him turning traitor. He ended up on Colchis, which was a planet where religion was everything. It doesn't help that he was also raised by Corferon, who is a chaos-worshipping zealot. So I think it's quite understandable that religion was very, very important to Lorgar. He needed to believe in some kind of greater power. It was a core tenet of who he was as a person. On Colchis, they worshiped the Chaos Gods, but Lorgar saw visions of the Emperor coming to the planet and believed this was a premonition of him being the one true god. So Lorgar became the prophet of the One. Quick side tangent, I have never been a big fan of Lorgar personally. That being said, I actually really enjoyed his Primarch book, Lorgar, Bearer of the Word. So if you're on the fence, I say you should definitely check it out. So the Emperor comes to Colchis and Lorgar joins the Great Crusade. And he's doing a pretty good job. The only issue is that he takes a little bit too long making planets compliant. You see, he's instilling religion onto these planets and cultures. He's showing them that the Emperor is the one true God, which is in stark contrast to the imperial truth that the Emperor wants his sons to spread. Because as we know, the Emperor is very anti-religion, which again, even worse than all of that, it's causing him to fall behind all of his brothers. So the Emperor is not very pleased about this. Lorgar has this crown jewel, this perfect city, the city of Monarchia, which was the capital city of the planet Curze. So the Emperor sends Rabute Gilliman and his Ultramarines to send a message to Lorgar. And to do this, they utterly destroyed Monarchia, razed Lorgar's greatest achievement completely to the ground. And he wasn't done there. The Emperor himself then went down to the planet and personally reprimanded Lorgar and his legion. So Lorgar is super distraught for a while and is eventually convinced by Corpharon and Erebus to complete the Great Pilgrimage. So he eventually finds the Eye of Terror above Cadia and is like, yo, there's gods in here. I need to worship some gods. Seems like a match made in heaven. And we know how things ended up from there. So the thing about Lorgar is it's not that he wanted there to be gods. He needed there to be gods. He needed religion in his life. And I feel like that was super obvious, right? And I think that the raising of Monarchia was a little bit of an extreme step. I know, surprise, surprise, the Emperor doing something really big and rash instead of just communicating with his sons. And to be fair, he probably did say, hey, religion bad, but obviously Lorgar needed more than, hey, stop doing religious shit, goddammit. I mean, he went from the imperial truth is, you know, no gods, no religion, to, hey, this thing that you're super proud of, I'm gonna destroy it all because you're moving a little bit too slow for me. I don't know if I'm crazy, but I think there are some steps between that could have been taken. So as much as I don't want to side with Lorgar, I think that he was kind of pushed to the Chaos Gods. So I say that he's justified. So last and probably the most confusing, we have Alpharius and Omegon. This one is weird because they were both traitor and not traitor. Don't worry, I will explain. So in the book Legion, Alpharius and Omegon are approached by the Cabal, which is a group of various ancient Xenos species who are very anti-chaos. And to be fair, they're not big fans of humanity. And they showed the twin Primarchs two futures. One, where Horus wins and the Emperor dies. Humanity ultimately tears itself apart, but that also leads to chaos dying out. And two, the Imperium wins, but slowly dies over the next 10,000 years, and chaos becomes more and more powerful and eventually wins. Alpharius felt that the Emperor wanted the destruction of chaos above all else, so he ended up joining the traitors as a loyalist. Like, they're helping the traitors, but he believes that he's helping the Emperor's goals. So yeah, he joined the traitors with loyalist intentions. What muddies the waters even more is that it doesn't seem like Alpharius and Omegon were even on the same page. It seemed like Omegon would undermine his brother's actions. Almost like Alpharius went traitor, but Omegon was still loyal, even though it's not quite cut and dry like that. But yeah, basically, sometimes the Legion was loyalist and sometimes they were traitors. And with the Alpha Legion, it's already kind of hard to tell what they're actually trying to accomplish because they're so mysterious, which still carries on to modern 40k. Their ranks have every alignment possible, from actual loyalists to full chaos and every shade of gray in between. So honestly, I can't say if they were justified or not because I can't even really say if they were actually traitors or not. And even if we take it at face value and they are traitors, Alpharius's reasoning kind of makes sense in a way, and even if he says that's his reason, who knows if that's actually true? Also, the fact that Alpharius and Omegon pose as each other all the time, so who's even to say that when it's said that Alpharius does something that wasn't actually Omegon, and vice versa? Man, this is making my head hurt. Instead of saying if this is justified or not, I'm just gonna say, I am Alpharius, and call it a day. Thank you so much for staying till the end of the video. I really appreciate it. It means a lot. I hope you enjoyed yourself. If you have anything you'd like to see me cover in the future, let me know in the comments below. Thank you all again. Until next time, Goblin out.